Okay, Amy, thank you for meeting with me today so that we can discuss the literacy in the third grade that we're noticing at our school. We're really trying to hit this year those students that we see struggling with reading. So I've come up with 3 strategies for us that we're going to go over. I want you to see this quick reference sheet that's going to show you where we're going to go through this presentation, but by the end of it, I hope that you'll be able to find ways to help those students that you do see struggling to read in your classroom. Okay, so how can we identify those struggling readers? What are some things that you can look at while you're in the classroom to say that your students are struggling and that you need to try to focus on them a little more? Well, struggling readers can be identified through observation and through assessment. Some early indicators that a child is struggling would be that they are stumbling over grade level words, that they are withdrawing during reading time. So this would be the student that is, instead of excitedly raising their hand to answer questions or to read out loud, you notice that they are not participating, not making eye contact with you, and that you just notice them withdrawing more. And they're unwilling to work with partners. A lot of times you notice this because the student is embarrassed to show their peers that they are not able to read at the same level that they are. And that they are distracted during independent reading. You know, those readers that have a hard time reading when they're sent off on their own to read independently are not going to be successful at it. And so they tend to find other things that they're more successful at to do during those reading times. I found this interesting website on Reading Rockets that I want to take a look at right now. It was a great portrayal of these types of students that are struggling in the classroom and what you might notice to help you identify where they're struggling. So I want to read a couple of the ones to you and see if you maybe have seen any of this in your classroom. So I wanted to focus on Felicia because I know that in the 3rd grade we do see this a lot with our students where they are struggling with fluency and where they do need more work with identifying words correctly. So it says Felicia is one of those kids that her teacher, Laura, can't quite figure out. When Felicia is reading aloud, she usually manages to get almost all of the words right, often on her first attempt. However, she gets each word after a very long pause. Laura can see Felicia moving her lips as she tests out each and every word before she says it aloud. Laura had all her students read the same test aloud to her one-on-one. The record of Felicia's oral reading showed 95% accuracy, so she was able to read the words, which was technically in the top third of her class. But it took Felicia 3 times longer to be able to read the words and to finish the story. Once, upon, a time, so she had to pause after each word. Felicia's reading sounded like the puttering of an old Japaloy. When Laura's other students read, they read in phrases or sentences or whole stories. They read fast enough for the listener to follow the storyline. But no matter what Felicia reads, she always reads word by word, and it's always painfully slow. And we've experienced this with our students in class. We see these students, and these are the students who don't want to read in front of their friends. They don't want to answer questions in class. Laura had never actually seen Felicia finish any book that she started. Every day, her students read for 10 minutes independently before lunch. Every day, Felicia picks up a new book and reads the first few pages. When Laura calls the students to line up for lunch, Felicia immediately shuts her book and puts it back on the shelf, while the other children either bring their books with them or leave their books open on their desk so that they can pick up where they left off. The next day, it's a different book and just a few pages again. Laura's not sure exactly what the problem is, and she doesn't know what she can do to help Felicia. What is Felicia struggling with? Well, Felicia is struggling with fluency. And the great thing with this website is that you can go through and it tells you how to help the student. And it goes through very different scenarios, and all of these are different ones that we might see with our students in class. So when you get time, I've listed it for you. Just try to look at this and see where you can identify students in your classroom and how you can help them to be successful. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is, what do you do once you suspect a struggling reader? It's easy to identify the reader, but then you have to figure out, okay, what next? So if you suspect that you have a struggling reader in your class, the first thing you need to do is to test their fluency. And I mean, not their fluency. You want to test their word knowledge before you move into the fluency part of it. I've listed on here the Fry's words. This is 1,000 words that the students should be able to read at this point in the 3rd grade. Come on. I bet you it went. Yep, of course it popped up here. It just didn't pop up for us. Okay, so this is a list of words that is going to do a great job at identifying for you if your child knows the words. First, they need to know the words before they can fluently read the word. And they need to be able to fluently read before they can comprehend. So it kind of all plays with each other. So I'm trying to get the list up for you. Technology is always fun. Alright, we'll come back to those as soon as they finish downloading. Then you want to provide a DIBELS fluency test. Most schools have a DIBELS program set in place. At our school, we do the Oregon DIBELS, and it is where we are able to test the students and see how many words they can read per minute. If you notice that a student is not able to read the words fluently, then that's ultimately going to affect their comprehension, because if they're struggling so hard to have to focus on how to read the word, they're not going to be able to focus on what the word actually means and what the story is trying to tell them. And then the last part of it is you want to provide them with a reading comprehension test, such as the Scholastic Reading Inventory, to determine their Lexile levels. And this is the test that we give at the beginning of the year, at the middle of the year, and at the end of the year to our students to determine their Lexile levels. But for those students that are struggling, we can give it to them once a month to see where they're progressing. So after the struggling reader has been identified, we're going to incorporate these 3 reading strategies that I have developed this PowerPoint towards, that is going to help bridge the gap for those students. And so the concepts that we're going to focus on are developing vocabulary, learning with trade books, and guided reading comprehension. And all of these are things that we can easily incorporate in the classroom that is going to help our students. So we'll go ahead and get started with strategy 1, which is developing vocabulary and concepts. And you'll notice on your guide that I have posted for you the steps, and then you'll be able to incorporate the steps into the activities we're going to look at. Okay, so strategy 1 for developing vocabulary and concepts. I've just put a little journal citations that I found helpful for me to guide where I wanted to focus on struggling readers. And vocabulary seems to be a pretty important aspect. So it says, why is teaching vocabulary important? Vocabulary knowledge is key to reading comprehension. Providing students with direct instruction in vocabulary has been found to influence comprehension of text more than any other factor. And so that's kind of, fascinating to me at all the different things I try to focus on for my students to help them with reading. And according to Bromley, vocabulary is what I need to be focusing on, because once I build that vocabulary, they have the foundation to comprehend. And then what can teachers do? When teachers understand how students can acquire knowledge of vocabulary concepts, vocabulary instruction can be effectively integrated within context of subject area learning. So what it's saying is, once you have the foundation, and that's what we're fixing to look at, of ways that you can help students learn vocabulary, then you can use those foundations not just for reading, but for all your other subjects that you teach. So let's look at the first one. I really like this one. It was called the list group label. And what you're going to do is you're going to have students brainstorm a list of words on a topic. So the example that I put was shapes. And you just have students randomly list words. They don't have to be specific. Then you break your students into learning teams, and you have them group the words in an order that would make sense to them. So the first list was just all of these shapes, but if you look at it, you have 2D shapes, 3D shapes, shapes with corners, edges, shapes with the same number of sides. So they could create a group, and it might be different than what the other person in another group creates. It's their thought process on what the words mean. And then you have them come up with labels for their groups. So once they put the words into groups, they come up with a label for them. So as you can see in the example, they had circle, cube, square, cone, rectangle, pyramid, triangle, prism. They categorized it and labeled them as 2D shapes and 3D shapes. And then you have the students discuss what they created, what were the groups, and why did they create them. So could you see yourself using that in class?
Yes.
I think it would be very beneficial.
Very beneficial for science and social studies, especially with the government unit in 3rd grade.
Right. It does not. And that's where I've read that if we can bring in those other subjects, we are so much better off than if we are just focusing on reading, because we don't have the time to focus on science and social studies as much as we do for other subjects. And if we can bridge that and bring it in, then we're hitting everything at one time. Okay, this is my favorite. It's logographic cues. And you've heard the term non-linguistic representation. And it's basically the same thing. And my students in the past have done variations of this, but I really want to try to incorporate it more this year. I think it's going to help our students a lot. So Beers is the one who came up with this, and its logographs are visual symbols that represent a word. When paired with vocabulary instruction, logographs can become logographic cues to support students' understanding of the vocabulary concepts. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to give your student a note card. You're going to have the student write the vocabulary word on the front. Then you're going to have them turn it over and write the definition. And then this is where the students get the most excited. They're going to draw a picture that represents what they think the word means. Their picture should not look like the person beside them's picture, because we all have different thoughts on what a concept means. It's going to be similar, but it's going to be their cue on it. So, what I want us to do is I want us to try to create a logographic cue for fossil. Okay? So, what you're going to do is use this sheet of paper. This is going to be our vocabulary sheet that we're going to work with. And just come up with a definition that you would use for fossil and logographic cue for fossil. You can just do it on the back. It's fine. We're going to do all our notes for vocabulary on that. Okay. And then your logographic cue. It's okay, we're not art teachers for a reason.
All right.
Okay, so as you can see here, we were able to come up with the definition and we came up with a logographic cue. And when you try to remember during a test or a time when you need to be able to come up with the definition, you're going to picture that logographic cue, and it's going to help you and the students be able to come up with that definition quicker and better.
Now, would you do this while they're learning about the definition? So, because a fossil, since it's a representation or a trace left long ago, there are types of fossils.
Right.
So, would you do one for each type of fossil, but then you do one note card per, like your trace, your bones, and
the way I would do it is I would have a whole. This is what I do with my students when we do index cards. I give them an envelope. And they would write the unit name on the front of it. So if we're studying fossils as a whole unit, they would get an envelope and write fossils on the front. Then, as we experience new vocabulary terms, they will get an index card, write the definition, and make a logographic cue, and add that to their envelope. So, yes. They would do one for fossil, they would do one for cast, they would do one for trace, they would do one for the different types of fossils, and not make it a whole unit.
Good. Okay. I like that better.
Okay, and then another thing that I think the students will really enjoy doing is making the concept cube. Okay, students receive a 6-square pattern on tag board that can be folded up and taped into a 3-dimensional cube. Which will be about 4 inches on each side. It doesn't really matter the size, but that you could do that. Before folding, so you don't want to have the students cut it and start taping it and then do the activity because they're not going to be able to write properly. So before you fold it, you want to, on one side of the square, have students write the vocabulary word. So what we're going to do is the word fatigued. So if in one of your boxes, if you want to write fatigued, okay, then it doesn't matter which box you write in. The next one, it says write a synonym for fatigued.
It doesn't matter where?
Doesn't matter where.
We need a label that it's a synonym.
Nope.
Okay.
And then you want to do an antonym. And then come up with a category that it would fit into. So fatigued, there's not a right or wrong answer. This is just a study tool. So bedtime or exercise me after exercising, just a category. What are essential characteristics of the word? So if you're looking at fatigued, what would a characteristic of fatigued mean? Unable to keep your eyes open? Yawning?
Correct. So I have to write one of them?
Yeah, you could just write one in there. So, and students are going to need to be guided on this. And this is going to take practice. And then the last one, it says to give an example of fatigued. This is the exercise. You can do a logographic cue. That would be great to pull that in. Or you could do a sentence. The thing I like about this is it doesn't have to be too specific. This is to help them. So at this point, once the students have followed these steps, they will cut it out, fold it up, tape it, and they will practice rolling it. And at that time, when they read the word, we didn't label if it was a synonym. We didn't label if it was an antonym. They've got to try to determine if they know their word was fatigue, they've got to say, oh, this is a synonym. This is the antonym. And then the great thing about it is all students are not doing the same one. You give one student fatigued, you give another student a different one. Once they've practiced with theirs, they swap. And you've not had to sit and make 6 vocabulary cubes, you've made one, but yet you have 6 or more to practice from. So I'm excited to use this in our 3rd grade this year. I think it's going to be great for them.
I have not heard of this one before. I have to try that one.
I haven't used it before. I've seen the cubes, but not really how they were used. Okay, of course, you know, we're into technology and integrating it into the classroom. So I found the best website for us to use with our students. It's called Vocabulary Can Be Fun, and it has a wide variety of vocabulary strategies to use with the students. All the games are differently structured, and it works on antonyms, compound words, contractions, homophones, parts of speech, phonics, prefix, word roots, synonyms. You name it is there. So I put the link in here. We'll see if it will pull up for us. It's being a little finicky today. Great, it popped up. So as you can see, and the thing I said was great about this is it's so easy for the students to use. You give them the website, save it onto your desktop, and they immediately, the games immediately pop up. There's no logging in. It's free. And it has all the different ones for them to choose from. And they just click on the game, press play, and they're done.
This would be a good center activity.
It would be perfect for a small group.
Instead of just always using the go-to whatever reading website that you choose.
Well, they always want to do ABC, y'all. ABC,
that's what they want to use.
And that's fine sometimes. But it's not every day, because this is going to hit all of the things that we're working towards to help those readings students. Okay? And the thing is, I'm focusing on struggling students, but this is for all students. You know, all of our students will benefit from all activities.
They all need to build vocabulary in different ways.
Yes, they do.
Your higher readers need to build higher order vocabulary words.
All right. Let's keep going. Okay, so we finished with vocabulary. We know that there are other things that we already incorporate with vocabulary, like the vocabulary word of the week, where they focus on creating a sentence and working towards that. But these are other things that we can pull in that are going to add diversity to our vocabulary lessons. I feel like I do the same thing every week, and I think this is going to make it more exciting for them. The next thing, which we have plenty of, are trade books. So I chose to do this one because I do not utilize my trade books the way I should. I know I don't. I know they're there. I pull them out every once in a while. But they offer, as the book has shown me, so much more diversity to teaching that I am not using in the classroom. And if I'm not using it, I thought others might not be as well. So why use trade books? Learning with trade books involves exposure to many different genres and forms, all of which are potential sources of information for the active learner. Teaching trade books uses critical literary framework, and it allows teachers to push students to read the world. And I thought it was interesting how it said to read the world. And I was like, did I read that right? But trade books really do have a focus on our science, our social studies, and it has just a vast focus on everything. And it does introduce us to different parts of the world. Trade books are great for teachers to use to differentiate. We have science trade books that are high, medium, lows, and there's plenty of ways we could differentiate, but personally I don't pull them out the way I should. So I really hope that this is a way for us to build that. Trade books help students gain a better understanding of content concepts. We use the science textbook, we teach from it. Why not pull the trade book that goes with that subject and let the students get a better understanding of what we've taught through the textbook? And then I really liked this quote. It says, capturing students' attention and promoting the habit of lifelong reading provides a major rationale for using trade books. And I thought, well, if that is what it's going to do, then I need to incorporate it more. Dear time is one of the strategies that, we all have heard of, but don't use it the way that I should. I am constantly pushed from the minute they walk in to the minute they walk out. trying to get every standard taught that needs to be taught. And I know you are as well. And it can be difficult to say, let's spend 20 minutes reading. But it's important. And we have to make sure that we are allowing this time. Even if it means not getting to everything that we needed to. Because what we're learning is if we pull those trade books in, even though we're not physically teaching about fossils or teaching about Frederick Douglass, the trade book's doing it for us. So if you pull those trade books out during deer time and allow the students to use them, you're going to be hitting the independent reading with the trade books. So all too often in today's standardized test-driven culture, which we know for third grade is a big focus, we forget the importance of independent reading. Hundreds of studies document the fact that the more students spend reading, the higher their reading achievement. Okay? So if we're ultimately working towards building reading success, this right here is saying that they need to be reading independently too. They need to hear reading. They need to work with partners and read, but they need to independently read. So incorporate DEAR time into your class. DEAR stands for drop everything and read. That means no one's on the computer playing. No one's working on a worksheet because they didn't finish it. Everyone drops everything and they read. If you are finding a hard time incorporating it, start off with 10 minutes a day. And try to build up. But it does suggest that they need 25 minutes of independent reading a day. So I'm hoping we can try to build that into our schedule a little more. Okay, but on the same spectrum of that is they want teacher read alouds too. Because when a teacher is reading correctly, it's helping the student and they're benefiting from hearing text read correctly. Reading aloud is considered by many experts to be the single most important activity in developing student literacy ability, regardless of age. So it was talking about high school teachers reading to the high school students. You do not see that in a classroom very often, but it says that it's still important to do it. So what can you do as you're reading? A teacher doesn't need to just read and not get those students thinking critically. And so it's important that we demonstrate the strategies that we want students doing while they are reading when we read. So one of this is called a think aloud. And with the think aloud and the think aloud cloud, you can see that it says that make predictions before you begin reading. Ooh, I think this might happen in this story. Visualize the scene. Monitor for comprehension. So as you're reading, don't just start a chapter and read it all the way until you finish the chapter, close the book and say pull out your notebooks. You've got to discuss it. If you want them to comprehend when they read independently, you've got to help them comprehend when you read to them. Okay? And then reflective writing. We know we've talked about we've got to get them writing more. The Georgia Milestones has a huge writing component, and no matter how much we write, we still probably cannot prepare them for the amount of writing they need to do for the test. So I thought this was a great thing to focus on, and it is using something that we talk about a lot with the students, which is making connections, text to text, text to self, text to world, but it's writing about it. So Stephanie Harvey and Anne Gudiff's strategies that work is the idea of asking students to use writing to reflect on the mental connections that they are making in the text when they are reading on their own and making connections with their own lives. These connections are the text to text, text to self, and text to world. Okay, so with text to text, the reader is making a connection with the text that they are currently reading with text that they have read from the past. With text to self, they're making a connection with something that happened in the story and something that they have personally experienced. And that helps them to comprehend it better. When they can make a connection of, hey, I've done that before, or hey, I tried that before, then they are able to comprehend it a little better. And then the last one, and this is the most difficult one, is making a text-to-world connection. Especially if students aren't exposed to the news, they aren't exposed to what is going on in the real world, then they might have a more difficult time. So this is where we have to kind of guide them a little more. And the reader makes connections that relate to real world events, issues, and concerns. Okay. So I have provided you with a sheet that is going to help you with making text connections. And I've got this story called Exercise, which I'm working on. Jumping jacks, tumbling, handstands in the air. Exercise is better than sitting in your chair. Throw a ball back and forth. Go walking to and fro. Get ready, get set. On your mark, let's go. Find a friend and play a game or two. Exercise is easy when you know what to do. Put a helmet on and ride your bike. Strap on a backpack and go for a hike. Jump a rope and sing a rhyme. Be fit, stay active, play outside most of the time. Video games and television are fun for a bit. Just remember, it's not healthy to only ever sit. Climb the slide, use the swing and monkey bars. Try to walk if you can. Don't just use cars. Find the game to go outside. Breathe in the fresh air. Exercise is good for you. Let's make everyone aware. Okay, so I chose this because I felt like, well, we've all experienced exercise at one point or another, and that we could probably make connections to it. So let's see if we can come up with a text-to-text connection to go with exercise.
I've strapped on a backpack and gone for a hike.
Okay, so that would be a text to self.
Oh, whoops, I'm sorry.
That's okay. You go ahead and write it because
I thought you said text to self.
No, okay. The thing is, you don't have to go in order. If you've got in your head what you're thinking as soon as you heard it, then go ahead and share that and write that, and then go back to what didn't come to you as easily. I'm not a big hiking fan, but
I'm not either, but I have gone hiking.
I went hiking the other day, and there was a snake.
No.
Yeah, I was done. I was done. Okay, text to text. Let's think of a book.
I'm trying to think of a book.
Where?
I have an idea. I have a book.
Mm-hmm.
Officer Buckle and Gloria. They talk about putting on a helmet.
Oh, okay. And it mentioned putting a helmet on.
And so that would be one that you're making a text to, even though they're talking about safety, but they do talk about putting on a helmet. So they're even telling you to have safety on your under exercise.
Right. Yeah, so that would definitely work. So you could add that under text to text.
Or even, let me think of it, the characters are exercising.
You know, this really isn't a great example, but when it talked about jumping jacks, I thought of Jack and Jill because they ran up the hill, and that's exercise. Even though it doesn't specifically say they're exercising going up the hill, we all know that going up a hill is exercise. And that's one of those things that we could use to talk with students about. The text is not always going to say exactly the answer you're looking for, and our students struggle with that. Mine will say, well, it doesn't say the same words. Well, it doesn't have to. It needs to have a meaning that you can connect to. And then Text the World, I was watching Good Morning America, and they were giving different exercise tips and telling you, you know, the importance of exercising.
Oh, yeah, and if they watch their parents on Facebook, your Text the World could be where they are, even on Pinterest, they always have exercise tips that probably their mothers put in their pin board, or they share the exercise tip on their Facebook page.
Yeah, so that's what exercise is everywhere.
So that's a really good example of Text the World, because they can see it on television, or if they go with their parents to the gym. So they can have that experience of text to self of going to a gym, and exercising themselves.
Right. Okay. Technology integration again. This is a great game that I found that is going to help students practice making connections to text, and it was through PBS. And when you went to it, I'm telling you, this thing has like a mind of its own. Let's try to reconnect it. Well, welcome to the world of technology. Again. I've never experienced so much technology issues. Like there's a ghost messing with my machine.
Well, maybe we can look at it at the end. It doesn't work now.
That is something else, isn't it? Alright, let's try it this way. That is fine.
Well, Stephanie Harvey and I've always called her name Godvis. I have read that book 3 or 4 times, and they have fantastic strategies.
Oh, really? See, I have never read the book, Strategies That Work.
Oh, it's fantastic. I had it in my master's program when I went through a master's degree program, and when I received my reading endorsement, I did an entire project on just that book.
Oh, wow.
So if you would like to borrow it sometime, I'd be happy to share it. Been utilized a lot.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, so the next strategy that we're going to work on is the guided reading comprehension. And we know that this is important because ultimately our goal is that our students comprehend the text they're reading, comprehend the text that they are hearing. So comprehension instruction has been found to be effective when it is focused on addressing the specific needs of individual students. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the question-answer relationship. This was by Raphael, and they explained that the answers to questions can be found in 4 different places throughout the text. And they break it down for us, the actual places and types of questions to look for. So the first one is in the text right there. The words in the question are actually found in the text. This would happen to be the student's favorite question. You know, what was the boy's name? It says the boy's name was whatever. So they love these types of questions because they can specifically use the question to answer it. The next one is it's in the text, but they're going to have to think and search a little more. And these are the ones where the answer is in the text, but the wording is different. So they might have to change out words with synonyms, but they are still able to find the answer in the text. It's just a little more challenging for them. The next one would be in your head, the author, and you. This answer is not in the text, and the answer is determined by what the author says in the text. So you have to use what the information the author is giving you to form the answer.
It's kind of like an inferring.
Yes, it would be inferring,
strategy.
But it's still based on the information that the author gave. Okay. And the last one is in your head on your own. And this is the text gave you some information, but the answer is based on your knowledge and what you know about the topic previously. So that one's a little different. It would be more of like an opinion piece. They've told you information, but here is what you're going to respond. And it has nothing to do really with the story. So what I did was I created posters that you'll be able to print out from the presentation to hang in your classroom. Because I think it's important for the students to know about these 4 types of questions and to be aware, hey, not all questions are going to be word for word in the story. Not all questions are going to be your opinion or your thoughts on it. You're going to have to pull from the 4. So I just took in the text right there and then the definition of it and created a poster for you where you can display it in your classroom. So there's the first 2. And then here's the next 2. And I used, purple and blue theme because that's what's in my classroom. But I could always change it up if you did want to change the colors on it. Okay, this is one of my favorite ones to do with our Because of Winn-Dixie unit, questioning the author. How many questions can the students come up with for the author of Because of Winn-Dixie? You know, they're always wanting to know, why didn't the mother come back? Or was Winn-Dixie the mother's dog? I've had so many different scenarios of, why was the father so mean? You know, and then you have to explain, well, he wasn't mean. And there's just a lot of questions that the students have about Winn-Dixie that really aren't always answered for them. So this is a great concept for them. It's the questioning of the author strategy has students read the text and interact with the author as if they were able to be challenged or questioned throughout the process of reading it. First step is to have your students listen to or read the beginning of the text. Now, this is one thing that was a little different from how I have previously had students try to interact with the author, is that it wants you to go ahead and have your students write 5 to 10 questions that they think will be answered in the text. So before they even begin really digging into the text and getting questions of why did the mother leave, they want us to go ahead and come up with questions before the students even have as much experience with what's going on in the book. Then discuss some of the questions before you continue reading, because what question one student might have might lead another student's questions as well. Have the students continue reading to determine the answers to the questions, and then afterwards have the students ask the questions and explain which ones were and were not answered. And I have a feeling that with the Because of Winn-Dixie unit, a lot of the questions that the students are thinking are not answered by the end of the book. But there's great talking points and references to guide the students to be happy with the ending. But a lot of them still have questions remaining. So an extension to use with this is to have your students actually write a letter to the author asking them those remaining questions that were not answered throughout their reading. And then what I always like to have my students do is offer a suggested story solution. You know, they're asking the questions of why didn't the mother come back, or different scenarios, but they know how they want the story to go.
So they should write an alternate ending.
They should. I definitely believe that would be a great way. And again, we're focusing on comprehension. By them having these questions and by coming up with their own ending to it, they're comprehending the text fully. They know what's going on. They know they're not happy with how it ended, and they know how they want it to end. They're comprehending, and they're working on that comprehension fully here. So I always really enjoyed that part of Because of Winn-Dixie, and I'm excited to try to incorporate the asking questions before, because I've never done that. So I think that's a great strategy to use for questioning the author. Okay, the KWL strategy. We've all seen it. We've all heard it. But it's important. And so that's why I include it in here, is because it's not a new concept to most of us. Some of us it might be new for. But for the majority of us, the KWL chart has been around, and it's still around because it's successful. And it is... sometimes it seems like it's overplayed, but to me it really is effective. And it seems like one of those things that I'm always trying to find something else to do besides the KWL chart, and I always come back to it. So it's one of those things where it's important to first find out what the student is thinking about a text. What do they already know? Perhaps you don't need to do 3 weeks worth of lessons you've already created, because they know a lot of the information. Or possibly they know information incorrectly, and you're going to have to re-guide their thinking, which is hard to do sometimes, because once they have it in their mind that they know something, it's hard to convince them otherwise. Then the next thing you want to do is to let them ask questions. What do they want to know? They need to want to know something. You know, I have a hard time when students tell me, I don't want to know anything. I don't know. Well, surely there's something you can think of that you want to know about the topic we're going to be studying for 2 or 3 weeks. So I think that that's an important thing to really try to encourage, is wanting to know things, wanting to learn. And then the last one, of course, is what did they learn? You know, you want to finalize the study by going back and filling a chart. And there have been times when I've got my K and my W filled out, and we get to the end of the lesson, and I don't have time for the L. I've got to make time, because we've got to ensure that they did learn what we think they learned, one. And two, we've got to reinforce those skills, because if not, they're going to walk out of that classroom and forget half of the things that we've taught them.
I always forget to do the L as well. And what my goal is this year is that if I don't do it that day, then go have that as my starter to the lesson, my activator, and say, what did you learn yesterday? And write it down.
Here's the thing, too, that I like to do, and I think it would be great to use in the classrooms. I fill out the K with my students. I fill out the W with my students. And when I'm running short on time, I will give my students a Post-it note and have them fill out what they learned, and have them just go stick it to my chart paper. And then the next day, like you said, let that be an opener and say, hey, look, I was just reading what you guys learned yesterday, and such learned that fossils are found in the ground. And this person learned that this fossil can be a cast or a mold, or there can even be trace fossils. It's a great way. It wouldn't take them 30 seconds to write a sentence of what they learned, and as they're walking out of your classroom, just stick it on the paper. First of all, they love writing Post-it notes, and they love sticking it on your wall. So that would be a great way to just go ahead and finalize that. You could do it the next day too. Yeah. You know, but if you wanted to add a little more fun to it, just hand them a Post-it note and let them add to it.
You're closing up your lesson. So if you don't change classes, then you have to have some kind of certain divide in your classroom that you've closed the science lesson and you've opened up a social studies lesson.
It's key to helping them, again, with comprehending what they're doing, because without fully digging into it and questioning about it, coming up with questions about it, and then closing it with what they learned, they're going to lose comprehension along the way. And we need to make sure that they're comprehending. So I have this KWL chart for you to use with your students. I think it will be really helpful for them. For you to use with them. So another thing that we're going to do, okay, we talked so much it fell asleep on us. Okay, is technology integration. We need to be incorporating technology into, we can't do it every single day, get the kids on the computers. We don't have enough computers to do that. But we do need to, at some point, every other day at least, each kid needs to touch a computer at least every other day. My goal is every day. But with them being pulled out for EIP and AEP and different things, I can't always let that happen. I can't get the time that I need to. But within every other day, my students are always touching the computer at some point. So here is one of the greatest websites that you can use to help students with reading comprehension, and that is readtheory.org. And if you're not using readtheory.org, you need to be.
Start today.
Yes. If you will not find a better, and if you do, let me know, but if you will not find a better reading comprehension website for free, this is a website that you log on to. The students get a username and password, and they are given an individualized test to find their learning level. And they are given interesting passages. My students are always excited about their reading theory passages. And they are given passages, and they have to answer questions. They have to fill out writing. It pulls in the different aspects of comprehension. And if the students are not answering the questions correctly, it moves them down levels. If they are answering all the questions correctly, it moves them up. It is constantly monitoring their level of comprehension, and it is pushing them as far as they can possibly go. What I love is that I get instant feedback about their progress as well. I'm able to pull up their essays and pull them over and say, hey, let's look at this. Let's talk about this. I'm able to pull up charts that shows me their reading comprehension. It is a tool that all teachers need to be using.
I love this website. My favorite part about it is that it not only just has fictional passages, it has nonfiction, it has poetry. It incorporates all genres in reading, and it makes the students more intrigued about it.
Right.
So they're getting the nonfiction, which is a harder concept to understand, and they're taking tests to help build their nonfiction knowledge.
Right. They're excited about it. You know, when I say, okay, go to the computer and you can choose to do Read Theory, Lexia, or Scholastic reading tests, they are Read Theory, Read Theory, Read Theory. They're going at home and doing Read Theory. So it's one of those websites that if you're not doing it, you need to be doing it. So that I can't say enough about Read Theory. It works on comprehension. It works on all these skills that you're pulling in through all of your reading steps. Okay, so while you're using these 3 reading strategies, I really hope that you're able to bridge the gap with your struggling readers. I hope your students that are doing good, I hope you're able to push them even further. Again, all of these strategies can be used for all your students, but it's really going to help those students that are struggling. And I hope that you found this helpful and that you're able to use the various handouts that I have provided to you. If you need any of them altered a little to fit your classroom needs, I'm able to do that easily. If you have any questions, you can always hit me up at hill.ashley@mail.scboe.org. Thank you. Sorry for all the technical difficulties.